slides to talk about our work to protect our coastlines throughout the U.S. with the Surfrider Foundation, from right here in the Florida Keys all the way to Alaska and virtually every stretch of coastline in between. And so I'm going to give some background about who we are at Surfrider and what we do, if you haven't already heard that from the amazing folks at our local chapter who are out beating the drum of Surfrider in the local community already. And then I'm going to talk about all of the different ways in which we work to protect our coastlines from some of the most pressing challenges that we're finding, and talk about that from the national scale all the way down to work that's happening here in the Keys. So we can dive in. So this is a lot of text, and I'm not going to read all of it. Hopefully everybody can read it from where you're sitting. But Surfrider is a national not-for-profit dedicated to the protection and enjoyment of the world's ocean, waves, and beaches for all people through a powerful activist network. Emphasis on the enjoyment portion of that. We always like to say that we are equally as stoked about getting there and enjoying the resources that we work tirelessly to protect day in and day out. The organization was founded in Malibu, California in 1984 by a group of surfers. I will say you do not have to surf to be a member of Surfrider. I am one of those folks. I would probably make a fool of myself on a board. I like to spend my time out on the water fishing and occasionally diving or snorkeling out here in the Keys, a lot less so. Because I had a baby about a year ago, that's in part the reason why I haven't been able to make it here for this presentation yet, but I'm really excited to be here. And I wanted to take a second to just talk about the national impact of our network. So while Surfrider started as a group of surfers in Malibu, California, our network now maintains over 1 million voices for the ocean. That's supporters, that's activists, that's members, really driven by our more than 250 volunteer-powered chapters and clubs, which have contributed to more than 1,000 coastal victories throughout the U.S. So tremendous impact. And I have to pause our local Florida Keys chapter. We have some of our board members here today. If y'all could raise your hand so people can find you afterwards if they're interested in joining. This is the people power here in the Keys. I always like to say, like, yes, I love working for Surfrider. I spend a lot of time behind my computer talking to people on Zoom, but if you want to talk to the folks who are out there cleaning up beaches, testing local water quality, and hosting events in the community that promote the stewardship of our local Keys resources, you want to talk to the chapter folks who are out there. And I encourage you to find some of those folks after the presentation tonight and get involved. There will be a QR code at the end for you to scan for you to join after today. But let's dive into our work around protecting our coast. So that was our mission. My mission and mandate as the Coast and Climate Initiative Senior Manager is this. Surfrider enacted a very ambitious strategic plan several years ago, and it is freaking me out how much closer we are getting to 2035 by the day. But by 2035, one of our goals is that all of our beaches, coastal habitats, areas, recreation areas, and communities are protected because states are effectively managing their coasts and planning for sea level rise. This is a huge mandate and one that we know many states are not adequately prepared for. And this is a problem. I imagine that most of you recognize why that is a problem along our coastlines. And we're going to talk about that in just a second, because before I do forget, I just want to introduce the team that I work with for my organization. So I don't do this work alone. All of these folks are actually based in California. I am the one of the few staff members that we have here in Florida, but they each play an instrumental role in advancing all of the programs, policies, and really the strategic direction of this work for the organization that we're going to dive into today, and the different pillars of our work and ways in which to protect our coastlines. So why protect our coasts? Well, there's a lot of it. Over 95,000 miles of coastline in the US. That coastline is very much directly linked to the lifeway and livelihood of so many communities, no matter what it looks like, right? We know that here in the Keys, our version of a coastal area looks very different from this sandy beach that we see out here that we might see elsewhere in Florida or elsewhere in the country. This includes mangrove habitats, coastal wetlands, and so many other habitats that are instrumental in the success of our community because they're valuable no matter where you are in the country and what stretch of coast is yours. It is an incredibly valuable resource. The most recent estimates are that over $240 billion is spent by visitors on our beaches every single year. And I think we understand that very acutely living here in the Florida Keys. If it's not the beach, it is the Florida Keys National Marine, the Coral Reef, Florida Bay, Everglades National Park, all of the coastal resources that we all, I mean, I think it's why all of us are here. We love these places, and most of us rely on them for the robust recreational industry that we have here. And lots of people come to the beach, 3.4 billion visitors who are making their vacations where we live every single year. And so that's all to say, these are incredibly valuable places no matter where you are, whether it is here in the Keys, on the coast of Southern California, or in the Great Lakes. All of these places are incredibly important and valuable. And I would say also, valuable and important culturally, socially, and to us as people. And so great value, but also incredibly vulnerable. And I don't think I need to spend too much time underscoring the vulnerability of these places as well, but it's estimated that from anywhere from 50 to 70% of our coast is at risk of a variety of factors, sea level rise, storms that are more frequent and intense. And that is maybe something we're a little bit more accustomed to here in the Keys, but there are other places in the country that are maybe not as accustomed to seeing storms or flooding with the intensity that we are seeing now in projected to increase as time goes on. So the threats could not be higher to our communities, and we need to do something about it. Unfortunately, the current for coastal management is very flawed and favors approaches that are maladaptive in a time when we need to be incredibly adaptive to the changing conditions along our coastlines. Just to talk about that briefly, there's a couple of different ways that we can react or manage our coasts when we are confronted by that tension of having infrastructure and living near coastal areas and those coastal areas migrating. And one of the most frequent responses in a lot of places is to harden the shoreline. And I could understand why, right? Like we think, okay, if you build the wall or the rock revetment, that is a hard structure that is going to prevent further erosion or loss of beach upland of that area. And while that's true, what's also been found is that often, I would say, there's like a little bit different here in the Keys because we're not dealing with a sandy beach habitat in all places, but that in general, it's going to accelerate and exacerbate adjacent to those structures. So while you might be protecting the house behind the seawall, what you are doing is actually passing the buck up to the property owner, up the beach. Beaches are being lost. Another way that we can address coastal challenges and erosion is accommodating the beach or accommodating those changes. So that can mean restoring coastal habitats, as we're going to talk about a little bit further on. Sometimes that's also beach renourishment, which is also not favored by Surfrider. If you've ever lived anywhere where there's beach renourishment going on, it's a very expensive undertaking. Millions of dollars are spent to pump sand on the beach, only to then have the next storm event wipe out that multi-million-dollar investment by that local community. So when there are no other options, when we can't restore it, when we cannot, well, certainly we don't want to harden it, but we sometimes have to move out of the way, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like and where we've actually facilitated that process as Surfrider in our. So what is our objective? We want to strengthen coastal resilience, and we're going to kind of break down what that goal means in practice for Surfrider and the work that we do. So again, briefly, some term sharing. Coastal resilience is the ability of from events like storms or flooding or sea level rise. And it also involves adapting to long-term stressors. So when you look at this photo here, there's a lot that you can see, right? We have a highway. This is in California, in Cardiff. And there you have beach, you've got the roadway, you have this beautiful wetland, and then you have the community. When I say coastal resilience, I'm not just talking about the beach, and I'm not just talking about the wetland, but we're looking at the entire system and saying, how do we ensure that when the next storm comes, not only is the beach more resilient, but we know that that infrastructure is going to be protected. If it can't be, we might need to think about moving it out of the way. Is that wetland going to be healthy and able to adapt? Are those communities going to be impacted when those changing conditions happen? So when we talk about resilience, I think sometimes it's oftentimes framed as like solely the resilience of the environmental feature, but really we want to look at the whole system in that frame. And then what are nature-based solutions? And nature-based solutions can look, but essentially, how can we best work with Mother Nature's intelligent design to adapt along our coasts? Beaches and coastal areas are inherently dynamic. They are made for change. Been to the beach, you probably have found sand that you have carried into your car and brought home with you from that beach. And I think that is so emblematic of how those systems work. If there is a slight shift in condition, if the sea level is rising, if there is flooding, if there is a storm, so long as there's not an obstacle in the way, typically those obstacles are like our home structure that we build close to the beach. But if there are not obstacles in the way, that system is naturally made to migrate and really ebb and flow with the changes that are happening. And that's natural and normal. Again, it's usually when we intervene, have structures or roadblocks or impediments that we built. So nature-based solutions can look like wetland restoration. We're actually going to talk a little bit about some of the projects and what they look like in Florida. Habitat restoration generally. It also can look like marine protected areas. Yes, here we go. It can look like, while this is not Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, it can look like Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. How do we protect the pristine resources that we already have, that we know need to be protected, preserved, and conserved? And so, a nature-based solution can be proactive, it can be restoration, shoreline. It also can be, again, protecting what we know needs to be protected and is already seeing challenges, as we'll talk about. So this is how we do what we do and how we achieve that nature-based coastal resilience at Surfrider. We have 3 pillars of our work that really contribute to that ultimate goal. We have a policy and campaigns arms that happens at the local and federal level. We have a stewardship arm, which is our climate action program, as we'll talk about in just a bit. Our Hands in the Sand coastal restoration program, where volunteers get out onto their beaches and in their coastal areas and actually restore stretches of coastline, enhance their adaptive capacity. And then finally, we have this community pillar, which I would say is one of the newer areas of our work, but really working with communities as they're dealing with many coastal issues to help them co-design or really inform the design of solutions to their respective beaches and coastal areas threatened by climate. So I'm going to dive into each of these individually. I will say not all of them have a relevant Florida example, but I think that they are exciting to get to see the type of work that we and my team are really trying to replicate everywhere within our rider. So first, I will start in Florida with a little bit of credit where it is due to where our network has been successful in implementing through policy work thus far. So want to shout out the incredible Florida policy team and all of our chapters who played a role in advancing many of the state level policy campaigns here. I don't know if y'all know how difficult it is to advance proactive environmental policy with the Florida State Legislature. But Surfrider has been effective in doing that, and in just the last year have been able to do incredible work to protect conservation lands, to strengthen, as we'll talk about, the framework for implementing space solutions in Florida, protecting our state parks from development, stopping the guana land swap, and then protecting height restrictions up in addition to policy campaigns and wins, our volunteers are also out doing incredible work restoring our coastlines. This is actually just in this last year alone, our chapters in Florida have been able to restore 1.6 acres of coastline, remove 78,000 pounds of invasive species, as we'll talk about, install 20,000 native plants, and engage a lot of folks in the important work of restoring our coastal beaches. So major shout out to the Florida folks out there who have been working on this work. And with that, I'm going to dive in and talk about, so this is also a newer program. I have the pleasure and privilege of getting to lead a lot of really newer work for the organization. I will say that Surfrider has been doing restoration work for the better part of the last several decades, but never had a formalized program for it. And so that is in part what makes this such a new and exciting program for us. But in essence, as I mentioned earlier, the Climate Action Program is about nature protecting nature. How do we work with Mother Nature to better protect ourselves and our community from rising seas, flooding, and other? And to do this, I mean, this looks different in every single place across the nation. In some places, it's removing species that compromise the integrity of dune ecosystems. They make the dunes stable. They don't occur. The plants don't as native. Move what is taking away from resilience of our dune invasive species removal events. We also have native plant populations, grass, this wetlands, mangroves. So it looks very different in every place. This is actually up on Rockaway Beach up in New York City, where we partner with Climate Week. But whether you're in New York City or here in Florida or out in California, we are actively working to restore dunes and restore ecosystems that help make all of it. So I wanted to highlight just a couple of the projects and places in Florida where we are doing this work. I also wanted to, and I apologize for breaking up, not having this in my speaker notes, but I just wanted to highlight the inception of the program. Surfrider volunteers have restored more than 100 throughout the U.S., installed 636,000 native plants, and removed 116,000 species, all while connecting more than 14,000 volunteers. So the impact of the program is huge. Very proud here in Florida of this work. Is right up the road in Miami. Our Miami chapter has been hosting dune restoration events with the city of Miami Beach. They actually hold the only permit for dune restoration with the city of Miami Beach, and have been hosting events for over 50 years. So incredible inspiration up the road with the work that they're doing, and nowhere more important than here in South Florida. I think we all recognize that we're at sea level, and so ensuring that our dunes are healthy and our coastal resources are protected is really important. I know that there's volunteers who, past and present, and board members who are represented in the photo on top, and we really have looked to Miami as an example nationally for how to do this well, and are replicating it in places all over the country. And similarly, we have an incredible dune restoration program in the Space Coast as well. This is actually launched in part out of their Ocean Gardens program, which is not one that I am as connected with, but we do have some ocean-friendly gardens here in the Keys, if you guys did not know that. Install ocean-friendly gardens to help address stormwater pollution and urban runoff, to help with several years they've been able to install thousands of native coast through this program. And I'll say we do this because Mother Nature needs a boost, I think now more than ever. And the Climate Action Program really has, I think, as I've felt it, has really been like our local grassroots antidote to any climate fear that folks may be feeling out there in the universe, to be able to get out there with community and to help your dunes be more resilient to the next storm event is something impactful, and it's been a whole experience to get to watch this program. So that's one arm, that's stewardship. That is how we take care of our coast day in and day out, weekend after weekend. The next piece that I want to talk about is nature-based coastal adaptation. I mentioned earlier, this is a little California heavy, so we will get through it, but it's a really exciting case study, I think, in how to work with communities to enact solutions that in a lot of places are challenging. And so I want to bring you all today from the Florida Keys to Ventura, California, to Surfers Point, and I will do a little bit of acclimating for everybody here because we're going to start up here. So right here is the Ventura River. This is the traditional source of sediment for this beach here. And this is an after photo, so we'll see some of the before. But this is a famous surf break out in Ventura, California. Surfers Point is what it's called, and it is really one of the more iconic surf breaks in the region that draws many visitors annually to the site. And it is also the site of the leading global example for managed retreat and relocation globally. Okay, so this is what we're working with here. I will give a little bit of history. I will try and make this as quick as possible of my time as well. So what you're looking at on top. So Ventura, California, in the 1980s, there was a very ill-fated project where the local government wanted to build a bike path and a promenade along where Surfers Point is. This was opposed by the community, so bad project. This is like so typical coastal management that we are really working hard to counter, but decisions were made behind closed doors without any transparency. Community, they build all these structures, storm events happen, and an emergency rock revetment is installed in the early. Enter Surfrider. So we came in alongside a group of organizations to talk about to really shape this coastline from, almost a point of no return to this gorgeous restored beach that frankly has been about 3 decades. So let's dive in a little bit more into how this works. So I mentioned bad project, not supported by the community. A working group was formed in 1995 in the area to reimagine what this stretch of coastline could look like after such a disastrous decision was made. There was a diverse group of stakeholders who got together and started to talk through what it would look like if they changed what that beach looked like. The project had several goals. And I will just back up and say, I guess expand upon the point that this is not how coastal management. Typically, decisions are made behind closed doors. Community is consulted as a box to check rather than being an integral part of the consultation and really informing what designs and solutions. That's not what happened. Model and part what this project did was show that this is actually how you. Large group of stakeholders got together. They had several goals. They wanted to protect the road and bike path. replace parking that was lost from and during those storm events. They wanted the shoreline to be stabilized. They needed to also relocate the bike path in tandem with protecting it and restore the beach. Those are like massive goals. Major coastal decision to make, and they had to do all of these things and find consensus. And so a multi-decadal campaign started. We have a volunteer named Paul Jenkin, this incredible Superman who has been working with Surfrider for 30 years with the goal of seeing this area rewilded to its initial glory. And I'm happy to share that this is now Surfers Point. So you can see, initially, this is the bike path that was encroaching on the shoreline. This is all of the parking that they were. And now, again, it's taken 30 years, but we have a parking lot that is all the way pushed back on the fairgrounds. We have a bike path that is now where the road have this gorgeous, wide, beautiful beach that is currently in the process. So while it's taken a long time, the community informed every step of fixing the bad decision that was made. And again, this is really the first example. Locate infrastructure out of harm's way and restore. So we've learned a lot from this and are starting to take that and apply it to other sites within us and within our network at Surfrider. So what we've learned from that and what is going to inform our work moving forward, when we build along the coastline, it's going to be vulnerable. I think we recognize that living in coastal areas, that there is a certain amount of vulnerability and risk. And if we're not planning for what future risks look like. And finally, top-down planning. That is just not how we want to work around our coastlines. Typically, that ends up with a collapsed bike path at Surfers Point rather than a. So we work to achieve everything that's happening on the right-hand side of this. We want these processes to be led by the people who are using the resource and led by the folks who are in community, acted by the decision makers. We want to help bolster resilience, whatever that looks like. In some places, that's restoration. In some places, that's relocation. And in some places, it's like somewhere in between both of those, or we're planning in the short and long term. And then finally, there has to be some level of adaptation. So understanding how we can be better suited for the beach. So that is really what encompasses our nature-based coastal adaptation work at Surfrider. And again, like I said, we don't have any current examples in Florida. I will say, anecdotally, there was a really interesting funding opportunity a few years back up in St. Johns County where Republican legislators up there had asked for funding to buy and relocate homes in the Summer Haven community. That money was never used. So we have seen some opportunities come up here in Florida, but nothing to the extent that we have point. However, we do know that as coastlines change, this type of work is going to be. And then finally, I'm going to talk about my favorite bucket, which is campaigns and grassroots advocacy. So as I mentioned earlier, Surfrider has always been an advocacy organization, and we have been on the road to 1,000 victories for a long time. In fact, the completion of that Surfers project was actually our 1,000th victory for the coast. But we are doing a lot of work all the time to ensure that our coastlines are protected, and again, that states are able to better and best manage their coastal resources in light of climate change. So we have a lot of different campaigns that we federal level. Starting from the top, we do have some top level priorities that more fish that I spend time working on. One of the most important, and I was so pleased to see the note about the CZM funding that's used to support these talks here. But the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration is the federal agency that does more than any other at the federal level for our oceans. So we at Surfrider, and what I spend a lot of time in my day-to-day is working to advocate with congressional leaders to be able to reauthorize and fully fund. So that's not every single NOAA program. That's a lot of programs. We have one section of the pie for that specifically, but it's an important one. It is coastal zone management. It is coastal grants. It is sea grant. It is national marine sanctuaries. It is, let's see, what else am I missing from my list of other things? Hill Day, the folks who are on the Hill, you guys know, right? So there are so many programs that touch our coastlines, and frankly, there have been underinvestments for a very long time in these programs, and the threats have never been greater. Just this year, the president's budget proposal calls to terminate many of these programs that are most important to our coastline, and while Congress, from the conversations that I have had, is likely going to reject the president's budget, because regardless of what side of the aisle you are on, you recognize that healthy coastal ecosystems and communities are so important for the majority of states within this, and they understand what the implications of loss of that funding is. So protecting NOAA and all of its programs are incredibly important to us, and that's why that is a top priority. In addition, we also work to protect the Coastal Zone Management Act, or the CZMA. This is not as much of a priority on my list right now because the threats seem to have subsided, but this is our bedrock coastal protection. This is what gives states authority to be able to manage their coastline. It's what helps provide them funding and co-management with the federal government. And so to take that away is to take away the core of our coastal protection. So there were several threats through the budget, through a bill that was introduced in Congress this past year, and fortunately, so we continue to advocate to make sure that the policies that help protect our coasts are maintained. Additionally, at the federal level, and this kind of bridges, Surfrider's kind of funky. We have Coast and Climate Initiative, and then we have an Protection Initiative together. And so I want to talk a little bit about some of the work that our network has done in partnership with the chapter to strengthen Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, which has been a really important campaign for Surfrider for over years. This has included long-term advocacy with the Sanctuary Advisory Council and regular engagement with the restoration process. This is something that is still ongoing, as the future of the blueprint, I think, is in flux currently, but it certainly is a really important campaign for us and for all of the marine sanctuary network. I would say one of the biggest things that I want to emphasize is that Surfrider, as I mentioned earlier, is an organization where we enjoy as much as we protect, and that is a value that I think comes across in how we engage on these processes. How do we balance protection and recreation, ensure that conservation goals are achieved, but also ensure that all of us who like recreating in these places as well are able to, under new management. And then I'll just talk a little bit about state level solutions briefly. Again, yes, we wrap up. So state level solutions. What I did not mention, I did not give an extra background on what I have done with Surfrider, but my first role with Surfrider was working as the Florida Policy Manager, which meant I was in Tallahassee, regularly engaging with state lawmakers to advance our policy initiative areas. I always had a special place in my heart for what started as a mangrove planting bill that was sponsored by our own Representative Keys. Unfortunately, year after year of that bill, we were unsuccessful. There was always a hiccup, as there often is at a committee stop, where you're like, man, I think we're going to get it, or we pass one chamber only for it to not move together. After many years, This past year, signed by the governor, was SB 3, Coastal Resilience, a bill that directs the state pathways to implement the nature that we wholeheartedly support at Surfrider, whether that's mangrove replanting and restoration, dune protection, habitat protection, and then also promoting education. There are, I will say, nature-based solutions are still pretty utilizing with local governments and others, and so ensuring that decision makers and communities are of the full array of toolbox that are available to them is also another bonus from this bill. And this is something that really was driven and supported by our chapters. Card campaign, we had postcards coming in from the Keys to Palm Beach County, all the way up to Jacksonville and everywhere. So they importance of the bill. We were able to share proof of concept. After 15 years of doing restoration in Miami Beach, we knew what the shortfalls of the current were for permitting projects, and we're able to share that. And as is often the case with advocacy, pressure relentlessly applied. There were over 4 years of advocacy that went what ultimately would be the bill. Changed a lot, but we had great support and sponsorship. I would say our representative here was a great, and as well as the other folks in the Senate who helped to support it. So very excited that we in Florida are actually leading in a lot of ways to help support nature at the state level. So putting it all together, I wanted to just emphasize that I went over a lot in this presentation about all of the myriad ways in which we're working to protect our coastlines. They all have a role to play, but ultimately we do this because we care about the future of our coastlines. We want to ensure that they are resilient, that we have coastlines to share with future generations, that we're able to go out into Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary our grandchildren or our nieces and nephews, to be able to show them how incredible this place is. And so each pillar of this work really contributes in its own special way to achieving that, whether that's here in California, in Alaska, in Puerto Rico, really in so many. So with that, I want to close, and I'm happy to take questions. I also want to point out a great QR code that will direct you to the Florida Keys chapter if you are interested in learning more and getting involved here on the ground and all the great work that the local chapter is doing. I will say, again, like we are nothing without the work of the chapters. They're the lifeblood of Surfrider, and we would be able to do nothing in any of those pillars without the incredible power that we have. So with that, I will end and say thank you so much.
That was terrific. I think a lot of shared values and goals in the kind of membership-based small actions, working together, taking direct action to help learn about and protect something is definitely a common thing. Questions, comments? The question is, do you do any work on the Great Lakes?
Absolutely, we do. We have, our Great Lakes chapter manager reminds us all the time that it's not just coastal beaches that we're working along. Actually, we have a really incredible opportunity. We've been doing restoration work. Our Milwaukee chapter at Atwater Beach has been a recurring site for us. We've also done restoration work in Ohio. But one of the we have a major restoration project of a nature preserve out there that we're very excited about coming up in the not too distant future. So yes, we are active in the Great Lakes, and we have climate action program work that's going along that lake shores as well. Yeah, so the question was about getting involved with red tides and water quality. And so while that is not my subject area now, Absolutely. So clean water is one of our primary initiative areas, obviously also incredibly important here in Florida. When we have had red events, sometimes we've done flights over to capture different content and imagery from those, and then shared that in turn with lawmakers to talk about some of the water quality implications related to that. We've also talked about Vibrio and flesh-eating bacteria, blue-green algae, really whatever the water quality issue du jour is. One of the biggest priorities for Surfrider in years past in Florida has been support for funding for the Florida Healthy Beaches program, which is our beach water quality monitoring program in the state. If you go to Founders, if you go to any publicly owned beach in the county, there is testing that's going on a somewhat frequent basis throughout the year. Our local chapter helps to fill in the gaps where that's not happening as frequently, but that's primarily testing for fecal indicator bacteria to make sure that it is safe to get in the water and that you're not going to come to the Keys and get a staph infection. Yes, yeah. So there's actually the Water Task Force website where folks can go. You can follow the chapter and they will typically post the results. Yes, to let you know if it is safe to swim. Katie? That might have been for just to test what that water quality was to see if they needed to make improvements for them. This program specifically is public beaches, so that wouldn't necessarily be for canals, but yes. So water quality is a big priority in Florida in the Keys. Yeah, the Department of Health typically, which I think is, well, not to get me down too much of a policy rabbit hole, but it is one of the challenges is that our beach water quality monitoring is housed under the Department of Health, whereas all other water quality monitoring is under the Department of Environmental Protection. They don't necessarily talk or share that information all in one place, which can present challenges when there are water quality impairments, or where there's one that could be working on restoring, frankly. So Surfrider is a nonpartisan organization. I call out our representative because he was the sponsor on the bill. But Surfrider does not endorse or support any candidate. I would encourage you, though. There are a number of organizations that are able to make those endorsements within the state of Florida. I think Vote Water is still around. Provide voters with the information about candidates' positions on water quality issues in Everglades restoration specifically. And then there are also some great local candidate forums where they ask environmental questions, and you can see if they know much of anything about the environment, which can sometimes be a challenge that we.
So this is an observation about Surfrider as an organization. So, between you and the local organizations here, you seem to do a great job of engaging younger people in both direct action and becoming educated and aware about environmental issues. To the point where we actually had a meeting up here with a bunch of community people, and we're talking about volunteerism a little bit, and it was like, oh, it's so hard to get people to volunteer and come out, and is anybody getting, and I'm like, pay attention to Surfrider because I see them in the events, and I know some of our own staff here have been involved in the organization. So I'm wondering how it's going and how you are, what kind of things you use to bridge and make that introduction to either new residents or younger people in the community to taking action for the environment and caring about it. I don't know if you, okay.
I'll just say, we were just having this conversation earlier with Barbara that Surfrider excels in this area. It's something that we know across a lot of chapter organizations in the environmental space, that they are a little dismayed because a lot of their volunteers are aging out and they don't know where to find new people to support their causes. I will say one of the ways that we set ourselves up for success before handing it off to Katie in the chapter is that we have a really robust student club network. So in addition to our chapters, we have students from various educational institutions who are engaging in the same ways as we do as with our chapters, but at the club level while they're in college. And so, I mean, like, we have some incredible students throughout even just Florida, but everywhere, who are hosting beach cleanups and movie nights. They're passing policy and hosting amazing events. So I think that that's a natural pipeline from club to chapter. They have a great experience with their student club, and then they graduate and hopefully come to work with their local chapter. But we also have a lot of fun. And so I'm going to hand it off to Katie to talk about all the fun that the chapter has here.
Yeah, so my name is Katie and I chair the chapter down here. I've been involved for a few years. I got involved just going to a beach cleanup. And I think one of the great ways that we have like good volunteer retention is the community around Surfrider. I mean, we have so many different programs. Emma only touched on a couple of them, but I mean, whether it's like water quality that you're interested in, or you want to get your hands dirty planting a garden, or beach cleanups, there's a lot of like a variety of different programs that Surfrider offers. And I feel like the community is really what like draws people back to coming through. And I'm glad you think we have a lot of volunteers. We definitely do have a lot of people that come, but it's definitely a struggle for us as well. And also engaging in different demographics of volunteers as well, because we do have a lot of young people that are down here, whether they're marine science interns or starting their career in marine science. That's kind of like what brings a lot of people to us. So we're always looking to engage with other people as well, and older demographics. We also have a lot of like women on the board as well, so always trying to like engage men is something that we try to be aware of as well. So yeah, it's something that we are like always working on too. If you guys are looking for ways to get more involved, we do have a couple upcoming events. Next Tuesday, the Islamorada Chamber of Commerce is hosting an after hours, not to compete with Mode's Bleach Watch training that's here, because that's actually my full-time job. So also want to promote that as well. But if you're down at Islamorada, the Chamber of Commerce is hosting an after hours at the new Environmental Resource Center that's at the Green Turtle Nature Preserve. And it's basically going to be like a place where people can come and learn about all the different environmental nonprofits in the Keys. So Surfrider will be there. That's also a location for our newest ocean-friendly garden as well, so you can kind of see what that is like. And then after that, in June, World Oceans Day is the 8th, right? So the Sunday before that, we're doing a cleanup in partnership with the state parks and eye care up at Dagny Johnson in Key Largo. So yeah, some fun things that we have going on. But yeah, always looking to kind of continue to engage people, doing fun social things as well as things to get your hands dirty and work. So yeah, we're always looking for fun, unique ideas to engage volunteers.
All right. Well, with that, it is my pleasure to present you with the coveted Fish and Friends. Seriously, this is a thing. People really value that. They do, and they covet it. But we're just thrilled to have you here, Emma. Thank you for coming and talking to us today about important things and entertaining us and educating us all at the same time. It's wonderful. One last round of applause. I will say, if you haven't already or haven't recently left a review for us here at the Ocean Exploration Center, we always love to have those reviews on Google Reviews or TripAdvisor or Yelp. And we're so grateful for you for spending your Tuesday evening with us. One last round of applause for Anna Velarde, our fellow who's going to be leaving us. For Sammy Brown, who's been a fellow with us, is leaving us. And for Avery. Thank you guys for being here and all of that. Thank you for Harrison for staying. And our volunteers. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.